How would you describe the perfect woman? Is there such a thing? What does that type of person even look like? And I was thinking back to some of the old TV shows that we used to watch. You know, June Cleaver on Leave It to Beaver. Was she the perfect woman? Or those of us who are Gilligan's Island fans, who's the perfect woman? Ginger or Mary Ann? I know my choice. Really, our answer should be our wives, that they are the perfect woman. We chose them, they chose us, and so they are perfect for us. But what are the traits of a perfect woman? Today we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 2, the creation story. And we're going to look at some of the traits of the one that was formed by God from the rib of man, and the perfection that was found in this woman. In Genesis chapter 2, we read that, you know, God had created all things, and the seventh day had come and he finished his work, and he rested on the seventh day. And in verse 18 it says, "Then the Lord God said, 'It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him.' Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He had brought them to the man to see what he would name them, and whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. The Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. The man said, 'This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man.' That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." You know, here's this creation story, and God creates all the animals, and he takes them before Adam, and Adam is to name them all. And as he names them, he sees that, you know, here's a giraffe, but there's also a counterpart giraffe. There's a hippo, and there's a counterpart to the hippo. And, you know, all these animals, they had a counterpart, but there was no one suitable for him, no counterpart for him. And so God puts him into this deep sleep, and he takes the rib out of the side of man, and from that rib he forms the woman who would be by his side. And, you know, so if we stop and take a look or think about what were the traits of that first woman? What did she look like? What was it about her that made her perfect? And there's Frank Viola he's an author, speaker out there that I listen to quite a bit, and I've talked to several times, and he wrote a book called From Eternity to Here, and he gives a picture. He paints a picture of the traits of this first woman, and we're going to just go through some of the traits that he shares in his book. Number one was that she was Adam in another form. You know, chapter 2, verse 23, where God creates this woman, and Adam says, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of him." And so she was actually Adam, but in a different form. You know, she was not made from the dust of the earth, but she was made from the rib of man. She was completely Adam, but in another form. She was Adam, but more beautiful. You know, can you imagine? Here was Adam. He was created by God, and he names all these animals, and he sees he doesn't have a counterpart, and he goes to sleep. And then he wakes up, and there lying beside him is this person that looks like him, but is different, is more beautiful, there's just something captivating about her. And she is me, but in a different form. And so she was Adam. She was like him, but different. She was more beautiful than him. And that was God's creation for Adam. Number 2, another trait was that she took Adam's name, and this is interesting. And Frank, what he talks about here, I don't know that I totally agree with what he says, but he makes a comment that Eve doesn't make the appearance until Genesis 2, when she is formed from the rib of man, because in Genesis 1, verse 27, it says, God creates mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And then in Genesis chapter 5, verse 2, he says he created male and female and blessed them, and he named them mankind when they were created. Basically, he would name them Adam. Both male and female, they were Adam. And so he has this picture of that, the implication that the woman was created inside of Adam. And then at this point in Genesis 2 is where God splits the Adam, and the woman is formed from the rib of man. I don't know that I totally agree with that, but the fact that she was named Adam and that it wasn't until after the fall that she was given the name Eve kind of shows that she took his name. You know, she was Adam at the beginning of creation, but at the fall is where we see, and this is Genesis 3 verse 20, where he names her Eve. So she's no longer just Adam as male and female, and they are mankind. It's now male and female, Adam and Eve. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it was one of the points that he makes. Number 3 was that she was God's masterpiece, and this is an interesting concept. You know, Adam's counterpart, when she was created, was more beautiful than Adam. And many times, when you look at an artist, it's at the peak of their life or the peak of their work where they make their masterpiece. It's the best thing that they have created. It's the top of what they have done. And you think of a few of the famous artists and their works. Leonardo da Vinci. He was the one that did the Mona Lisa. That is in a museum and is looked upon by thousands and thousands of people every year. It was his masterpiece. Or his depiction of the Last Supper. And we all have seen that picture. And we look at that, and it's a masterpiece that he created. Michelangelo did the statue of David. And that was a masterpiece. It was one of his greatest works. And, you know, others, The Scream is the title of one by Edvard Munch, or Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. And so we see these masterpieces, but it was the pinnacle of their work. It was the best that they accomplished. Well, this woman, Eve, was God's masterpiece. It was the pinnacle of his entire creation. She was the most beautiful thing in all of creation. Beyond the fish, the birds, the wild animals, and even Adam himself, she was the most beautiful thing ever created. She was God's masterpiece. And number 4, she was utterly devoted to Adam. And Adam was utterly devoted to her. You know, there was no one else on the earth at that time to distract her from her devotion to Adam. Everything she did was for him. Their life was together. They were united as one. She was completely his and he was completely hers. And they were created to complement and to complete each other. You know, he said it's not good for man to be alone, so I'll make a helper suitable for him. That complemented him, but also completed him. And that's what, you know, the marriage relationship, it's about completing one another, complementing and completing one another. And they were completely devoted to one another. Number 5, and this is another one that I'm not sure, but it's an interesting thought. She was uncreated. And this is an amazing thing if we think about this. Actually, that use our imagination as to what she looked like or what she was about. She was uncreated. She was fashioned and molded from Adam's own body. She wasn't fashioned from the ground like Adam was. She was formed out of Adam's own body. That's why he could say, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. And she shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. And if you think about that, if you think through all that, she was created flesh, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. And so, in essence, her DNA was identical to that of Adam's. She wasn't another creation. She was formed and fashioned from Adam himself. For she was Adam, but in a different form. She had that same DNA as Adam. She was by him and to him and for him. She was created for him, and she possessed all the genes of her husband. To me, that's mind-boggling to think they were the same, yet different. Because she was uncreated, she was formed from the rib of man. And along with being uncreated, she was flawless. She was perfect in every way. Because when Adam was created, he was created before the fall. So when he came into existence before sin ever made an appearance on this earth. And so he was perfect. And when she was formed from that rib, then she was just as perfect as Adam was. She had no flaw. She was perfect in every way. And that's one thing within the church. What do we focus on? We focus on Genesis 3 to Revelation 20. The work that took place from the fall of man to the renewal of man. But here in Genesis 1 and 2, we see absolute perfection. She was flawless. Number 7, Number 7 was that Adam was the source of her life. She came from within Adam. And that goes back to what Frank talks about, that she existed in Adam before God formed her from his rib. She was formed, built from that rib of man. Without Adam, she would not exist. She came into being by God through Adam alone. So Adam was the source of her life. It was because of him that she lived and had breath in her lungs. It was because he was her source of life. She came from him. And along with being the source of her life, number 8, she was made holy for Adam. The reason she was made was for him, and he was made holy for her. There was no one else for them to pour their attention into. They were made for each other. That goes back to the complementing each other, completing each other. They were made completely for one another. They built each other up, and they were for one another. They were made specifically for each other, and there were no distractions in that relationship until the serpent showed up. No distractions from that relationship that they were made for each other. They were joined together by the power of God, and they were made completely for one another. That's why Adam and Eve were created and formed. Number 9, she was the increase of Adam. When she came out of his side, Adam increased. He was no longer alone. There was another one like him, but different. He increased. When she was formed from his rib, Adam enlarged. He became greater. When she was built from that rib, Adam multiplied. It wasn't just him. It was him and her. And God tells them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And so each child became more of an increase of Adam, that he enlarged, that he multiplied. He was no longer alone, and he had this counterpart in this life that he could live for and live with and do life with. And finally, number 10, she was Adam's glory. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 7, he says, the woman is the glory of the man. And that just means that Eve reflected Adam. The woman was the glorious expression of the man. When you saw her, you saw him. Only better. When you saw her, you would see him as well, because she was his glory. She reflected who he was in all things. And so those were just, some of the traits that you think about, if we use our imagination of who this woman really was. Her greatness, her flawlessness, her perfection in every way, because she was formed from Adam before sin entered the world, and she was perfect. But what does all this mean? These traits of a perfect woman are of great significance. If we stop and think about it, extrapolate it, and don't you like that word? If we take the time to think through who Eve was when she became Adam's bride, it shows us what God intended for mankind at the very beginning. His intention was flawlessness. His intention was perfection. His intention was that complementing and completing one another, and continually growing closer to each other, and building each other up, and just having that sinless life with one another, expanding who we are together, or who they were together, being the increase of this world. And his intention was that everything would be perfect. And through that relationship, or through that connection with Adam and Eve, we can get a glimpse of what God's desire for his church is today. And next week, we're going to look at the traits of a perfect church. Now, is it possible to be perfect? What does that look like as a church to be perfect? And so look through what we just went through of the traits of Eve, the first Eve, the woman, and how does that look, or how does that translate in what the second Eve looks like, the bride of Christ? And so next week we're going to be looking at that. And if you were to read through some passages for next week, they would be John chapter 17, verses 20 to 26, 1 Corinthians 15, verses 45 to 49, John chapter 12, verses 20 to 36, John chapter 19, verses 28 to 37, and Ephesians 5, verses 21 through 32. And so read through those passages and go back and look at the traits of the perfect woman that was created at the beginning of time. And next week we will look at how that connects with the church of Jesus Christ today, and the traits of the perfect church as we live on this planet. God bless you. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.